Morning. So, a couple of weeks ago, I got a letter from my seminary in the mail. And it was from the president of the seminary just giving us kind of an end-of-the-year update. Everything that had happened at the seminary, everything that was going on. And he had a couple of requests from us. And one of the things that he requested from the alumni was prayers. Prayers for the senior class. Because the senior class had just gotten their Senate assignments. And what that means is that they found out where they were being called in the country or in the world to go and to serve God. Now for seniors, this is a really stressful time at seminary. Either they get their calls and it's a joyous time, yay, we're going to the Pacific Northwest, or yay, we're going to California, or it's a tragic time, oh no, we're going to the Dakotas. Like it's really a stressful, well, the Dakotas was the place that you didn't want to go in Chicago, but that's beside the point. So I got my first call. I was assigned to Metro Chicago, which was basically the city, any of the neighborhoods in the city. And I agreed to be interviewed by a congregation called Mayfair Lutheran Church. It had the name was based on the street that it was on. And one of the things you need to know about Chicago neighborhoods is that they're pretty much divided by race. Like if somebody's living in Chicago, you could give them the name of the neighborhood, and they would be able to tell you what race is in that neighborhood. So Woodlawn, for instance, was African American, Bronzeville was Caucasian, and Mayfair sat in a neighborhood that was predominantly Hispanic. So I sat down with the call committee to interview. This is my first interview ever for a congregation. And the call committee was all white, and they all happened to drive in from the suburbs to be a part of this church. And after they'd asked me a few questions about my thoughts on ministry and what I would want to do as a pastor, they gave me the opportunity to ask a question. And so I said to them, how many members of the church live in the neighborhood? And they kind of talked about it and thought about it, and they said, well, we think 2 families come pretty consistently and worship here in the neighborhood. They said most people who used to live around here and come to this church have now moved away to the suburbs. But they come back to worship every once in a while. Now, I don't know what every once in a while is. I don't know if it's once a month, once a quarter, once a year, once at Easter. But they said they come in and they come back to worship on Sundays. And they said, what we're hoping from a pastor, though, is that you can get a hold of all of those folks who used to be a part of this church, and you can convince them to come in from the suburbs and worship at this church. Now, this was an absolutely beautiful church. The sanctuary was huge ceilings, and they could hold 450 people easily, with plenty of elbow room. And they averaged 20 people a Sunday. So imagine what this church looks like. And so I was taken back by the answer that the call committee gave me. That they were hoping that I could get the people from the suburbs to come back into the city and worship. So I said, well, what if God is calling Mayfair to change their ministry to serve and worship with those in the neighborhood? To which the member of the call committee said, well, I don't know. That would be a big change. There's that word, right? Change. We don't like that word. People don't like that word. Again, I told you the story about interviewing with a church from North Carolina, and I just said to them, how do you feel about change? And immediately the member of the call committee said, well, we don't believe in change for change's sake. So people don't like change, and we Christians really, really don't like change. And so sometimes we use fancy words. We use words like tradition, which sometimes is a subtle way of saying we aren't going to change because we've always done it this way. So this morning, if you've been around church a couple times, you've heard this morning's gospel story about Thomas. Jesus says to Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Don't you love that phrase? I mean, he's talking about us, right? Blessed are us because we haven't seen, but we believe. And so we are blessed. We are blessed because of this. That's all of us right here. Now, I've talked to people who have heard the voice of God, who know that they've heard the audible voice of God. I've talked to people who have felt the presence of God so close to them that they knew God was holding them in moments. I've never met anybody that has seen the physical God standing in front of them, holding out his hands, nail marks and all. I've never met anybody like that. All of us here come to church because we are believers. So amen to that. We believe, now we can go home, right? We believe, we're blessed, we're good. Everybody go out into the world and share that message. Amen. We are blessed because we believe. Now, will you take that message? Will you take the story that you grew up with, the story you know about Jesus, that there was this man who came to earth and did ministry? Will you take the story you know about the miracles he performed? That he gave the blind their sight, and then he turned water into wine. That's our Lutheran's favorite one, right? That he turned water into wine. Would you share the story that Jesus saw a man who could not walk and simply said to him, "Get up, take your mat and walk"? And the man did. Will you take that story outside the doors of this church to the people you know need to hear the message of Christ, to the people you know need to hear that Jesus died for them? Will you take the story that is so familiar with them, and will you share it with those around you? Those who are seeking healing, those who are seeking something else. And if you can do that, if you can go out into the world and share the message of Jesus and the story of Jesus that you know from the Bible, most people, or a lot of people, will say this to you. They'll say something like, "Okay, thank you." You translate it, "Okay, that's great, you believe that, but so what?" So what? Today is the familiar story of the disciple who is affectionately known as Doubting Thomas. Now, I think that Thomas gets a bad rap. I've said this before. I'm on Team Thomas. I think he absolutely gets a bad rap. I mean, if being challenged by the notion that Jesus rose from the dead gets you labeled as a doubter, then I'm in a lot of trouble. I'm in a lot of trouble. You can call me doubting pastor. Do I believe? Absolutely. I believe wholeheartedly in the story of the Bible. I believe that Jesus died for my sins. But I have my moments. When life goes sideways and things don't turn out the way that I had planned, I have my moments. I think Thomas had a moment in that upper room. He comes back from being outside of the room, and the disciples are there. No doubt they're excited. They're ready to go. They can't wait to tell Thomas that they have seen the risen Lord. And Thomas says, basically, "So what? What's changed?" And can we really blame him for saying what he did? Can we really blame Thomas for doubting in that moment? Because it didn't change the disciples. The disciples saw him the first time and nothing changed. It didn't change their life or anything like that. I used to say all the time that if I was in that upper room and I had seen Jesus and I had seen the nail marks in his hands, then my life would immediately be changed. And I would know for certain that he had risen from the dead. I always thought that if I had been there with the disciples, I would have been those ones who was like, "Yes, I believe, let's go out and share that message." If I could see the risen Christ, how naive. Because when the disciples saw Jesus for the first time in that upper room, nothing changed for them. Nothing changed about their lives at that moment. They were still in the locked room. They were still confused, they were still scared, and they were still locked away from the rest of the world. So can we blame Thomas for him showing up and not believing what it is that they have to say? That when he comes back and finds the disciples doing the exact same thing that they were doing when he left, he doesn't believe them. "Thomas, we have seen the Lord," they said. "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails, and my hand in his side, I will not believe." In other words, guys, yeah, right, you've seen him. You're still here. You're still scared. Nothing has changed. That door is still locked. Guys, if it's really true that you saw Jesus, then you should be telling people about it. You should be outside of these walls. See, I like Thomas. Not because he doubted what the disciples told him, but I like him because at least he had the courage to be outside that room. We don't know what he was doing. We don't know where he was going or anything like that, but I like him because he wasn't always locked in that upper room. Again, we don't know what he's doing. Maybe he was the food runner. Who knows? But the point is, he was outside the room at some point. He wasn't there the first time that Jesus showed up. He was courageous enough to be out among the Jews that were looking for followers of Jesus. We don't really talk about the church. We never really ponder maybe what Thomas was doing. We always just focus on the fact that he doubted. And then he didn't come to believe in Jesus until Jesus showed him the nail marks in his hands and the wound in his side. See, we like to say that Thomas was the only one that had to see the nail marks in his hands in order to believe. But if you go back and read that story again, you'll notice the first time that Jesus shows up in that upper room, he appears to the disciples, says to them, "Peace be with you." And then he shows them the nail marks in his hands. And it's only then that the disciples believe that it's Jesus. So we can't blame Thomas for wanting to see the nail marks in his hands. So what was Thomas doing? Let's play this out just a little bit. Let's think about what Thomas might have been doing when Jesus appeared the first time to the disciples. What if, after hearing from Mary and the other disciples that the tomb was empty, and then after hearing from Mary that she had seen the risen Christ and he had called her by name, what if Thomas decided to see for himself? What if he was outside the walls of that room looking for Jesus? And what if while he was out there, he witnessed firsthand that the Jews were searching for followers of Jesus? And he heard what the Jews were going to do if they caught the followers. And Thomas had come to the conclusion that if Jesus had truly risen from the dead and appeared to Mary as she had said, he was beginning to realize that if all that was true, everything was about to change. That if Jesus had truly been raised from the dead, that changes everything. He knew that if that was the case, he would be sent out into this scary world, and he would have to witness to Jesus. He would have to confess that he was a follower, and he would have to share this message of Christ. That would change everything for Thomas. He knew that if it were true, he couldn't go back to the life that he knew. He knew that if Jesus had really risen from the dead, he could not quietly slip out of town with the rest of the disciples. His life was about to change. Perhaps what happened to Thomas when his friends told him that they too had seen the risen Christ, what was going on is he began to hope against hope. And he's just too scared because he knows that if it's true, everything changes. Because we don't like change because it's scary, because it's unknown, because we don't know what is on the other side of change. What a weird position for Thomas to be in. What a weird position for us sometimes to be in. Thomas is hoping that Jesus really was back, but also hoping that it wasn't true because of what it really means. I said earlier that if you simply tell people the story of Jesus, they may simply say to you in one way or another, so what? Maybe it's not what you believe that's going to change people. Maybe it's not what you and I believe that's going to change people, but it's how our beliefs impact others that will make the difference. So I pose the question to you and to all of us as a congregation. How has your belief impacted others? How has Christ changed you in the way you live your life? What I love about the story of Thomas is that I think that he was a big part of getting those guys out of that room. I think he changed the lives of the disciples. Stick with me for a second. Jesus appears that second time in the upper room and says to them, peace be with you. And he says to Thomas, here, place your fingers here, and your hand in my side. And Thomas says, my Lord and my God. Suddenly for Thomas, he realizes it's all true. The tomb is empty. He had appeared to Mary. He had appeared to the disciples. He had risen from the dead. And yes, it was confirmation for Thomas in that moment that everything is about to change. Now you can disagree with me about this whole Thomas theory that I have, and that's fine. When you have your opportunity to preach up here, you can give a completely different story, but that's what we're sticking with this morning. I like to believe that Thomas was the one that got those guys out of that locker room. The only difference between the first time when Jesus appears and the second time is that Thomas is there. And the next time that the disciples see Jesus is outside of that room on the Sea of Galilee. Thomas knew what they were up against. He knew the hostility that they would find among the Jews. But suddenly, in that moment, as Jesus is standing before him, suddenly Thomas's faith overcame his fear, and he rallied the troops to get out of that room and into the world. He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
So what? So what? Does that change the way you live your life? Does that change the way that we do church? How does the way that the church does it change the way how the church acts in the world? Think about it for a second. What about the good news, the life, death, and resurrection? Think about that story. Think about the story of Christ. What does that mean to you? To me, it means we worship a God of second chances. To me, it means that all of the bad stuff that we've done and the stuff that we were supposed to do, the times that we screwed up, has been absolutely forgiven. It is absolutely good news. It means that we have a God that loves us just that much, that he gives us that second chance. It means that when Jesus uttered those words on the cross, it is finished, it means that everything changed for humanity. Jesus loved the world to death. And then he defeated that death so that we could be buried in a death like his, so that we could also be raised in a resurrection like his. The grace and love of God is a powerful thing. it's a story that everybody would want to believe. Who wouldn't want to believe the good news and the resurrection to be true? It means we have a clean slate. But if it is true, but if it is true, that means everything in a person's life changes. The resurrection changed the course of creation. How has it changed the course of your life? How is the life that you lead, how is it affected by the life that Jesus gave up on the cross? I'm sure many of you are familiar with the familiar phrase, preach the gospel always and when necessary, use words. What in your life speaks to your faith in the risen Christ, where words are not needed? Just like people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, I believe people may not change based on the story you tell them about Christ until they see the change it's made in your life because of Christ. You see, I hope to be more like Thomas in our story today and less like the disciples who were locked in the room scared. The church needs more Thomases in it. We need more people in our church like that man who may have hoped against hope at one point in his life, but when he stopped doubting and believed, he came to realize that hope really was alive and not dead. That Christ really had been raised from the dead. When he realized this, he went all in for Christ. When he went out into that hostile world around him, knowing the pitfalls and the resistance that people would have towards him, but he went out into the world and shared the story of Christ. I like to think that he was the one that convinced those guys to come out of that locked upper room and get out in the world, because Christ was alive. So church growth is a big thing. You've heard this year, you've heard last year, you've heard in the last 10, 20, 30 years that the church is shrinking. You've heard that we need to figure out a way to bring more people into the church. That's the question. How do we get the church to grow? In fact, church growth is a really, really big business. And one of the things that I always seem to read when I start studying this whole church growth thing is that you've got to have a mission statement. You've got to have a mission statement. You've got to have a mission statement. But you know what I always say to myself when I read a mission statement? My immediate response after a mission statement is to say, so what? You see, I don't believe you have to have a mission statement. I believe you have to live out a mission. So friends, on the inside cover of your bulletin is our mission statement. I'm going to invite you to open that up and find it. It's on the third page on the right-hand side up at the top. I'm just going to invite you to read it with me. I'll give you a second. Open it up all the way so there's 3 pages, and it's on the far right-hand side. It says mission statement up at the top. Are you with me? It's very, very small. Oh, in the middle. I'm sorry, in the middle. I'm thinking from the 8 o'clock service. It says mission statement. So would you please read it with me? Our mission at Christ Lutheran Church is to experience Jesus and live like Jesus so that those desiring a greater meaning will enjoy an abundant life in Christ. Great. That is an awesome mission. I love that mission. That's one of the things that I loved when I came to interview this place was the mission statement of this church. But so what? Jesus tells us that we're blessed because we believe. Well, what are we as a congregation going to do about that blessing? How are we going to live that mission out in the world? Will we just say it out loud within the walls of this building, or will we live it out outside and be the church in the world? May we live our lives like Thomas, who at one point in his life hoped against hope, but upon realizing that he had risen, lived his life for Christ, so that the world would come to believe that hope is alive in the risen Christ. So brothers and sisters, he has risen.
He has risen indeed.
The peace of the Lord be with you always.
Hallelujah.
Please share that peace with